We are going to do a carryover from, or continuation from our February 24th meeting with Chief Mentor. As you know, the clock kind of ran out and didn't have opportunity to ask him questions, so this is council's opportunity to do so. We will allot 30 minutes firm for this, and we do have a hard stop at 1 p.m. For both workshops. So we'll allot 30 minutes with the chief, and the clerk will help me keep time on that, and he'll also help me keep time on as we get closer to our hard stop, so that we'll be able to maintain time. So with that being said, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I think the chief went through his presentation 2 weeks ago. He's available now to answer questions, and then we do have a very lengthy workshop agenda on affordable housing that we hope to get through as well. So I will turn it over to Chief Roy Mentor, who can just make some brief summary remarks about the presentation and then open it up to your questions, which is why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Chief,
you,
good
Mr. Melder.
afternoon.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm sure all of you have seen and still have copies of my presentation from the last council workshop, so I'm available to answer any questions or concerns that you have regarding any issues going on with the Savannah Police Department and or the presentation that I previously presented to council.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your opportunity.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Mr.
Alderman Leggett.
Chief Mentor, how you doing?
Good morning, sir.
Wonderful. I'm trying to figure out what do we have to do differently to try and gain morale for our department and make sure that we try to address some of our major issues and attract more people to our police department. Because now it's a public health issue that we have the unique kind of crimes that are happening in major cities larger than ours, and we are addressing a lot of it in small scales. So what do we have to do, or what can we tell the public to do to try to help with getting more officers to want to be a Savannah police officer, and what do we do to keep the people that we have here now?
Well, Alderman Leggett, thank you very much for that question, and that is an outstanding topic. I'm sure you and the council are well aware of some of the issues and concerns going on nationwide with retention and recruitment of law enforcement officers. I presented some of those statistics in the last workshop. I can go over those again if you need me to. But everybody in the country is struggling with recruitment and retention of police officers. I just read an article this morning with the Detroit Police Department where they lost over 100 officers last year, and so far they've lost 19 officers this year. So to try and address that, one of the things that they're doing is immediately giving their officers a $2,000 hiring a $2,000 bonus, and then their professional staff, their non-sworn, a $1,000 bonus. A couple of things that we continue to hear from our folks, of course, pay and benefits is the top thing that we continue to hear from our folks. If you look at what our pay scale is right now, we've seen several agencies, even in this area, jump above us. So that's one of the things that I think we need to look at because we're slowly sliding down the scale in terms of what we're paying our officers right now. I think the other thing that we're looking at is some short-term wins to kind of address some of the staffing challenges we're facing. A couple of things that we're looking at is seeing what we can do to kind of do the same thing that's being done to us, and that is attract officers from other agencies. Right now, we don't have what's commonly referred to as a lateral entry program because we don't have a pay structure or an organizational structure in place to bring officers in from other agencies. We're currently in the process of working with our Human Resources Department to put together a lateral entry program. We think that'll be good. We know that we have a very attractive agency here, and we know we have a very attractive city. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, pay, and then seeing what we can do to attract others to come in and bring in that knowledge and experience we may be able to get from people who are already experienced law enforcement professionals.
What do we do to address accountability amongst our ranks and our officers who are doing what the public would feel is out of character for a Savannah police officer? And what do we do to push it up the ladder, because we're on the front line, if you would say, because we have neighborhood groups and people who call us individually and tell us that certain things are happening, and we have to come in here, for instance, and purchase more police cars when we have police officers who are driving faster than the people we're giving tickets to. So what do we do in those instances? And the second part would be we've had a lengthy conversation with the city manager and the mayor about transparency and accountability. With transparency, each and every person up here on this dais is hands-on when it comes to community engagement. We never want to step on any toes of any of our police agencies. We just wanted to make sure that when we have accountability from asking of us from the community, we just want to make sure that we have it from you guys and we are giving information as it comes. But if we are with you, we are boots on the ground, we are constantly there, and we just wanted to let you guys know that we are just one agency, we're one city, and we're fighting the same fight. So we want to make sure that we are giving you all the support. We're giving you all of the tools you need to protect the city and everything that you need to bring us into a bigger and a better Savannah, if I can say it like that.
Well, thank you, Alderman Leggett. I'll start with your first question. Of course, professional conduct and responsibility is at the forefront of what we do as a law enforcement agency. I can tell you that we have an established professional law enforcement agency, one that has gone through a national and a state accreditation process, reviewing our policies and procedures. But I'm sure you also know that a couple things that we've seen as far as accountability for members of our department through the disciplinary process when that is necessary. But also, we're one of the few agencies in the country where all of our officers are wearing body-worn cameras. So when those situations come up, we're fortunate enough to be able to go to the video and confirm whether or not those incidents occurred. And we have no issues or concerns with having those issues addressed, whether it's at the precinct level or through our professional standards office, i.e. internal affairs. The second part of your question is about council members being out there and being on the forefront of with us. Of course, we enjoy a healthy relationship and a very great, positive, and professional relationship with our council members, and we continue to enjoy that type of relationship with our council members.
And the reason why I addressed it that way is we have created a positive work relationship with ranks. We do understand where we stand and where we can go professionally, but when we have conversations with our city manager, the mayor, and our captains, because sometimes I look at it as our captains who are over our precinct, they are hands-on. They are our first line of defense at times, and sometimes they are our saviors. And we just wanted to make sure that we don't hinder our relationships with them as we move forward, because sometimes we have to reach out to them before we can get to you. But I just wanted to make sure that we continue to have a positive relationship, not only with council, but with the community and our police. So because before you got here, everybody has been asking, why don't we have a positive relationship with our police force, and why can't we talk? And there's always been silos, and now that we've broken down half of that silo, I don't want to lose what we have.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman Palumbo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. At our last council meeting, the council unanimously passed an effort called Vision Zero, and a resolution to aim for 0 traffic deaths on Savannah streets in a calendar year. Can you tell us more about how Savannah Police Department could support the effort, particularly in traffic enforcement?
Well, I can tell you our officers are out there at the forefront of traffic enforcement. We've even broken that down to the precinct level, where precinct captains have access to specific traffic unit officers to assign to their specific precinct level traffic complaints. One of the great things that's happened recently with the assistance of the council is that we now have gone to an e-citation program. Our officers no longer have to hand write tickets, and the courts no longer have to decipher somebody's handwriting and make sure that the officers are correctly indicating the correct traffic codes, because all of that is automatic. I think you saw from the numbers from the last presentation that our traffic citations have dramatically increased, especially since we started doing e-citation. But anytime those complaints come through, Alderman, whether they're at the precinct level or citywide, our traffic unit is at the forefront of addressing those in association with our patrol officers.
Thank you.
Chief, I wanted to ask a question. and the question was asked about vacancies. And I know that we're not the best, we're not the worst either. And this is something someone who hired 4 police departments know this is just always a challenge. But I guess the question I have is, we deploy our forces through a beat system. And so even in the midst of the vacancies, all of our beats are covered, correct?
Correct.
24 hours a day.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there are very few situations where a beat is not covered. And if that's the case, there's always the option of moving officers around from different precincts.
And the beats are at a granular level in terms of neighborhoods and communities. So even in the midst of what we're going through, we're not, and I've been on council when we've had, over 100 vacancies, but we're not at a point where our beats, officers in neighborhoods, where that's not being covered, correct?
Correct.
We're able still to maintain our response time.
We're still able to maintain our response time, and our beats are being covered appropriately based on staffing levels at the time.
Thank
Correct.
you. Questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Alderwoman Gibson Carter, then Alderwoman Wilder Bryant, then Alderwoman Lanier,
Then Alderwoman Blakely.
then Alderwoman Blakely.
Good morning, Chief Mentor. We have unprecedented rates of gun violence on our street that's actually resulting in homicide, primarily among African American men and boys under the age of 25. I would venture to say that the vast majority of these crimes are occurring within our public housing areas and in some of our more vulnerable areas. I was at a restaurant on MLK, Rancho Alegre, over the summer, and it's when we had a shooting in Frazier Homes. And as I stood on the sidewalk to take a call, I saw probably 10 to 12 police cars leaving the northern corridor headed to that shooting, because subsequent to seeing this, I got an alert on my phone that there had been a shooting. And so in my mind, if half of those police officers would have been stationed or positioned somewhere in and about Frazier Homes, since we've had an increased number of crimes happening there, quite possibly the people who were a part of the shooting would not have been so brazen. And so while there is a belief that police can't stop crime, I don't know who would have the audacity to utter that. That's why we employ police officers. If I'm speeding down Abercorn Street and I see a police officer, I'm going to slow down. Police can stop crime. With that said, what are we doing to engage and schedule our units in our most vulnerable communities? I understand that there's a specialized unit assigned for our parking garages downtown. I understand that there are specialized units designated specifically to police certain areas of our downtown corridors. And for the life of me, I can't understand why those specialized units can't be situated in these areas where we can essentially pinpoint the same areas of crime all the time.
Well, thank you, Alderwoman, for that question. One of the things we constantly look at, and we look at it on a daily basis, and this basically comes from the precinct captain level, is looking at our deployment strategies and where officers need to be. Every day we have a commander's briefing. 9:30 a.m. we had one this morning. We look to see where crime has occurred and where we anticipate that our officers need to be deployed and what they need to do when they're deployed there. Also, in conjunction with that, at least 2 of our precincts have what's designated as public housing officers, officers who are designated specifically to interact and be the liaison for our public housing areas. Also, several of the precincts also have CSU units, which are crime suppression units that are sent to specific what we call hotspot areas and really focus in and concentrate on those areas. Those are units that are not necessarily responsible for responding to calls for service, but are designated for those specific areas.
Okay, I understand all of that, but again, what are we doing? What have we done? Because according to the last alerts, you sent me via this text, it doesn't appear that individuals are in real time in these locations. And so if we have officers who are working our public housing, what are those hours? Why isn't it a 24-hour assignment in the midst of this crime crisis? You know, we are right now positioning ourselves to receive mutual aid. I know the answer. And the answer is we're understaffed over 100 police officers. And the numbers that you have given us are not consistent with the number of tourists that we have. It's not consistent with the number of students we have or the people who visit here. So we are grossly understaffed as a police department. And when you have a crime happening in real time and we can't send a police officer because of other high priority elements, we have to acknowledge that we have a real problem with staffing. Now, I have addressed the personnel issue with our city manager. For whatever reason, our city attorney has decided that we can't go into executive session to really drill down to discuss personnel matters. But what we should do, Chief Mentor, is to look at why we are bleeding so many police officers. I know what the national averages are. I know what the standards are. But when we have police officers who are leaving Metro Savannah to become waitresses and real estate agents, we haven't taken the time to look at our exit interviews. What are these police officers saying as to why they are leaving? They are leaving our department and taking lower pay in some regard. And so we have to have these honest conversations with ourselves if we are to turn this department around. And clearly, you don't have all the resources that you need to help us fully staff and equip this police department. And I want the citizens of Savannah to know that we are in a crime crisis. We have a public health issue. And as long as we keep hiding behind a 30-minute presentation that you've been offered to give us, it's ridiculous. So, good luck, sir.
Alderwoman Wilder Bryan.
Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, ma'am.
First, I'd just like to applaud all the officers who stay and love Savannah. I just want to press upon that. I was a certified post officer too, and I took care of my family with that. So a lot of times it was not about the money, and so I don't want to suggest that people are leaving because of the money. They're not. Is there a number that you can furnish with us, and maybe not today, how many people are leaving not because of they're going to work other places? They stay in that profession, but they leave because something is amiss there. And so we, this council, all 9 of us, we always try to give you what you need to make sure you have the tools that you have. And so some of the tools that are missing now that is most important for anybody in Savannah is retention. So we can't keep blaming people and saying that they're leaving because of pay. We understand that. I worked law enforcement for several capacities, about 17 or 18 years, and while the pay was not always where I wanted it to be, we can't just say that it's about, you know. So what do we do? How do we help you to retain? Because a lot of people that I know, from captains on down to majors, I actually worked with them while I worked at the sheriff's department as a sergeant. So the retention now is a tool that we have to work on, and we have to do better than what we're doing. And the Alderwoman Carter mentioned that people were leaving to go to other places to work. We would want to know why, and what do we do? Because the officers there are thinking and they're telling us, and there's no way of you stopping that. They see us on the street, we're going to talk to them. It doesn't matter who they are and what rank. They have said that they're working in a hostile work environment and that they're not getting the communication or the acceptance of who they are and the value of what they're doing. And so I would just want you to tell us moving forward, because every time you've asked for money, you've gotten the money, so it's not about the money. It may be for some people, but I actually had the experience to work with a lot of people who love Savannah. And so now the dilemma is all across this nation, and not just in Savannah. There are people, crime is going to go up, but the officers who remain, they love this city, and they're just trying to figure out a way to hold on You know, and so what do you suggest? I mean, what do you have as a plan, as a corrective action plan to make sure that people stay? We invest time and energy and money, and it's a lot of your ranking staff who are leaving for less money. And so what is your answer to that, sir?
Well, Alderwoman Wilder Bryant, first, let me thank you for your service as a law enforcement professional in the past. I appreciate that. In terms of your question, one of the things that we're always constantly doing is seeing what we can do to try and make improvements in our organization, as in any other organization in the city. We, of course, are currently going through, and I'm sure you know the city manager's plan, a continuous improvement program with HR to identify, things that we can do to strengthen our organization and continue to retain members of our organization. We also recently implemented what we call business innovation teams. They are teams that are being headed by the captains that have line-level personnel actively involved in things like addressing communication, health and wellness of our officers, technology concerns, staffing and deployment. So we're continuing to have those conversations to see what we can do to get at the heart of, number one, why individuals may be leaving our organization. Number two, why individuals may be leaving the law enforcement profession as a whole. But number three, most importantly, what we can do to continue to improve and build upon the Savannah Police Department being one of the best law enforcement agencies in the country.
Okay, so again, I'm missing something. I'm talking about the humanistic approach to how we're dealing with people on any job. That's, when we talk about protect and serve, we want to protect and serve the officers who remain there. And so that is the most important thing to me right now, retention, because we can give you all the tools that you need. If nobody's going to be there to sit in those cars and answer those phone calls, and we know that crime is not going to go down because of this pandemic. Crime is going up. It's shocking that we all have to own this, and we know you can't do it by yourself, but it starts from within. And so I pray and that at some point that we can do something where officers know that they're valued and they're just not numbers. And so we really need to work on that. Thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, ma'am.
If I could jump into, Alderwoman, just to speak to and to echo what the chief said about a continuous improvement program for SPD, but for all of the city of Savannah and Team Savannah and all our departments. Morale and having a positive, productive work environment is key to the future and the success. We have wonderful leaders all across this government. We have wonderful leaders in SPD, and we want to invest in that leadership at every level, especially at our sergeant and lieutenants, especially at our frontline supervisors, and make sure there's a career pathway for young officers coming through the work, and they've got leaders who can support them and let them do their work out in the field. And that's what this program that the chief and the HR department and I have designed. And we're having a meeting tomorrow, really, with the department to go through some of those issues. But all of the things that the chief said in regards to pay, in regards to retention, in regards to doing everything that we can to make sure that we have a positive, empowering department, both at SPD but across Team Savannah, are the things that we're focused on doing. But I don't want to get lost either on the data. We need to be focused on the crime that's happening in Savannah, but we need to also realize that violent crime is down 8%. Homicides are up, and we have to focus on that. Our young people need more help, and we've got to invest in those upstream approaches, and we've got to focus on property crime that's gone up in the city. The violent crime is on a good trend. We've got to get our arms around the shootings and property crime as well. Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Melder, in addition to what you said, and so I still would want to see a plan on how we're dealing with morale. We need to have something in writing about that. I understand what you're both are saying, but, morale has a lot to do with people producing. If they're happy where they are, it's not always about the money.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Alderwoman Lanier.
Chief, thank you for your report. We had a lot of little crazy notes here. I think we're making a mistake as leaders to assume or suppose that the crime problem we have is a police issue. And I think we get it right when we start acknowledging that it's a public health issue. And listening to your report, and we have problems with the staffing level, retention, training. There's some training issues, diversity, resources, and one in particular, the spot shotter. Of course, we would like to have that in other areas and throughout, and especially these areas where we're having a lot of these repeated incidents of gun violence. And I think those are the issues that lead to the poor morale. And if we could impact these issues, of course, then we would change the direction and the trajectory of the morale. And when we talk about policing, I often bring up the community-oriented policing, because I don't think we do enough of that. I could remember days ago, a long time ago, when there were more police officers living in the neighborhoods, living in the communities. They were relatives or friends, or they knew everyone, and I think that makes a difference. And we know that right now one of the main issues in Savannah is affordable housing. So being that we've been concentrating on solving that, the housing insecurity issue, I think we need to include a program or design something where we would provide housing in the neighborhoods for police officers as an added benefit, as a community-oriented practice, and I think that would attract more police officers. Plus, it would help with the issue of relationship in communities with the police officers. So I'm one who would like to take a whole different approach as a leader and make more of an investment in the carrot as opposed to the stick. The cliche, we cannot police ourselves out of these situations, absolutely not. But the way we approach it, there's a subliminal messaging sent out that policing is about taking away someone's freedom. But we do know we have issues with laws being broken and gun violence. And then I go back to the experiments and the studies that have been done on investment. The one about the guaranteed income, they found that the crime drastically dropped. You can look that one up. And then if you study the entrepreneurial communities, the investment some communities are making in training of young people in trades and entrepreneurship, they see a significant decrease in the criminal element. And if we're going to move Savannah forward where everyone is impacted in a positive way, we're going to have to make more of an investment. Now, I know we've made, recreation is another area we need to make more of an investment, and we've had that discussion. We're doing some things. We have placed some monies in the budget that should impact the recreation landscape in Savannah, and that's a good thing. So hopefully that would have a return that would impact the crime statistics. There's a research that showed that there's a relationship between crime and poverty, and one impact the other. But we have had some poverty rates that have been so high, they weren't in proportion to the crime. You would think that the crime would be much further off the chart based on the poverty, so that tells me that the basic nature is good. People want the investment, they want the opportunity, but they result to other things because we don't have a balance of that investment that would keep them occupied in positive ways. So there's a concern that I have about reports. I've gotten several calls about the lack of pertinent information gathered in a report where the citizen then was in a position where they could not pursue a civil proceeding because they didn't have the correct information in the report. And that goes back to training, I'm sure, and turnover. And these are some issues. So these issues, the shortages, impact how we serve citizens. So I'm one who have been working diligently so we could balance that investment that would give some of these young people more of a choice than working in the warehouse or making up a bed or cooking in a restaurant. Would give them a creative outlet to be able to, they understand money. They understand entrepreneurism. So I tend to lean that way as opposed to lock them all up. So thank you for the information, and do consider trying to incorporate more community-oriented pieces. And you have some people on staff that have some talents that they're not being utilized, especially in the recruitment area. And I'd like to have some more conversation with you about that. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Alderwoman. And I'm sure, as you've heard our city manager talk about, a whole-of-government approach to crime and then also a community-based approach to crime. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that in the future. The second thing I want to talk to you about is ShotSpotter. I'm sure you know that the council has approved additional funding to expand the ShotSpotter program. So I'll be following up with Mr. Melder about getting a contract done and then getting that before council so we can actually get started on that project. So thank you very much for that. And in terms of community policing, I can tell you that I have and continue to be extremely proud of the men and women of the Savannah Police Department. Although we continue to face some staffing challenges, they are still out there every day reducing crime. They're still out there every day responding to calls for service and continuing to engage members of our community, which I think is directly related to and associated with our 8% decrease in crime last year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our final comments, questions, Alderwoman Miller Blakely, and then Mayor Pro Tem Shabazz.
Mr. Mayor, after them, I'd like to speak as well.
Thank you, Chief Mentor, for your presentation at our last City Council meeting, but I'm just concerned. On week before last, there was an incident where a young man lost his life on Portland and Newcastle Street. The community reached out to the police department to ask for additional police presence when they did the balloon release. No one showed up. So my question to you is there a certain amount of people, police officers, I'm sorry, that is allocated to a particular district to do certain events like that?
It depends on what the situation is. I'll have to check on the situation that you're talking about over at Portland and Newcastle with Captain Beatty. It's my understanding that there was a presence over there, but I'll have to check with her and double check on that situation. But yes, when we have those incidents that come up, of course, first and foremost, we can use our neighborhood resource officers, our public housing officers, and then when they're available, we can also use our patrol officers or their crime suppression unit, who may also be available.
Since you're understaffed, have you all considered using our retired police officers to assist you for events like that? Is that something that you even consider? Because there are a lot of retired police officers that would love to come back on a part-time basis to help. Have you considered even reaching out to them?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we have some of our retired officers who are now serving in our reserve program. One of them, I believe, will be here this afternoon taking care of security for the council meeting. So we always look at that as an option. One of the things that we're looking at right now is how to do a better job of staying connected with our retirees. So that's something that they're working on through our office, bringing them together, maybe having quarterly luncheons, but staying connected with them, getting a newsletter. But we want to make sure that we continue to see what they can do to assist us, but we want to continue to allow them to be connected to the department.
One more question. We know that the department is short-staffed, so that means that police officers, and this is in relation to morale, police officers have to do double duty or do additional jobs and what have you. Are those individuals being paid to do those additional jobs?
Well, I'm not sure what additional jobs are. If it's part of their duties and responsibilities as an officer, that's part of what they're being paid for. Are you talking about something outside of their duties?
No, I'm not talking about outside. For instance, if a police officer has to do, because you're short-staffed, if they have to do another job along with their regular duties, are they being compensated for that?
I'd have to get more information because I'm not sure what other job outside of their assigned duties and responsibilities we'd be talking about.
For instance, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know what your duties would be, but if they're running a beat, and then they come in and they have to do additional paperwork, or they have to do something additional to what they're normally supposed to do, are they being compensated for it?
Well, yes, if they're out there responding to calls for service, they have to come in and they have to do their paperwork, and that's part of their duties and responsibilities, get their paperwork done. And if it takes longer than their assigned shift, then yes, they get paid overtime for that.
That's not what I'm talking about. If they have if you have two jobs and one officer is there and that job has to be done, for instance, I'm going to use a management officer. This officer had to do 3 and 4 jobs at one time, but he was not being compensated. We had to go in and negotiate him being compensated for the job that he was doing, because he was not getting paid for it. And I'm not going to mention any names, but my question is, if an officer is doing more than one job because we are short-staffed, is that officer being compensated? Is that officer increased? Is that pay for that officer increased until that particular job is filled?
Well, I guess the best way for me to answer that, Alderwoman, is I'd need more information. But yes, they're being compensated for what they're doing. If they're doing something over and above what their job description is, then we need to know about that and see exactly what they're doing and how that fits into the compensation that they're currently receiving.
Okay. And if they are doing more, who would they reach out to? Would they reach out to their superiors, their supervisors, to city manager, to you? Who would they reach out to? Because obviously a lot of them, this is what I'm told, but you know, they don't know what to do. They're having to do this extra work, but they're not getting compensated for it. So,
Mr. City Manager.
Alderwoman, the officers are only assigned what they're assigned. Some days are busier than others for officers. We regularly pay overtime for officers and to work overtime, and it's many officers see that as a perk and a bonus and build that overtime work into their annual and family budgets. But an officer at their rank only has the duties and responsibilities as they're assigned, and they perform those duties and responsibilities as assigned. Some days are busier than others. They may respond to more calls than they do on other days. They may have more paperwork to do on other days than some. But that's part of their assigned duties, and they're responsible to get those done. If it takes overtime to do it, they're paid overtime. Certainly, our focus is on making sure that we have all of all of our FTEs and vacancies, and we have a full sworn officer count at SPD. That's our focus. That will continue to be our focus. We're looking at ways in which we can incentivize officers to join the force, incentivize retention here on the force, make sure that we have all of the right HR policies in place to get our sworn officer force back up to what we know it should be. But officers are being paid for their duties and responsibilities.
okay, I hope so. And I will be talking to you more in depth about this, City Manager. Also, Chief Mentor.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we reaching out to our universities and colleges for recruitment? Savannah State, Savannah Technical College, Georgia Southern. Are we reaching out to those entities to possibly recruit police officers?
Absolutely. We've been to all of those institutions, and I think you were at one of our badge pinning ceremonies where we pinned a badge on a Savannah State University graduate who has completed our field training program and is out there riding on her own, riding a solo beat. We attend all those job fairs. I actually sit on the Criminal Justice Board for Savannah Tech for their academy, so we constantly look at who they have going through their academies. But we're not just looking at just those local colleges and universities. Our recruitment team, which is headed by Captain Clarence Few, continues to scour the area. They've been in North Carolina, they've been in South Carolina, they've been down in Florida, so they continue to make the circuit and continue to take advantage of those additional recruitment opportunities.
See, that's the problem. You're talking about these outlying areas. We need individuals from Savannah in our communities.
Alderwoman,
and we're not, hold on,
City Manager. And let me ask you this, Chief Mentor, how many, off the top of your head, how many recruits have we gotten from our colleges and universities in this area? Do you know? You mentioned one, so she stuck out with you, but I'm talking about overall.
I'd have to pull that information up. I don't have that information available.
I would appreciate how many from this area, how many from our universities and colleges as well.
And Alderwoman, to respond to that as well, something that the Chief and I have been talking about and working to develop is a local cadet program where we try to recruit local Savannah High School students who want to go to Savannah State or want to go to Georgia Southern, that we could work with those universities to get them tuition, to have them be cadets throughout their college experience, so they're getting paid for a job, their tuition's taken care of, and when they graduate, they get to be pinned an SPD officer and know that they've got a very great career ahead of them. That one, make sure that we're getting local folks to serve in SPD, which we want to do, and make sure that our young people have opportunities for good, high-paying jobs with great pensions, which is what SPD provides.
Last question.
Alderwoman, I mean,
I know I have another question.
Well, please.
What is the average pay for a Savannah police officer? What is the starting pay for a Savannah police officer?
Starting pay for a recruit while they're in the academy is about $38,200. Once they graduate from the academy, they go up to $44,330.
So what are they paying in the country as a whole?
Well, it depends on which area of the country that you're in, because different areas of the country, depending upon what the cost of living is different. I can tell you, when we compare to some of our local agencies, I can tell you that Chatham County is right at about between 46 and 50,000. I can tell you Garden City, they're starting their recruits at 40,000, and they're starting their officers at 48,000. Pooler sets their own rate depending upon the level of experience and what the chief decides he wants to pay at that particular point in time.
Okay.
And this goes back to earlier comments that the chief made, where I think 2 years ago this council took actions to get pay step and pay grades for SPD and our fire department to be the top. That was the case 2 years ago. Our agencies around the region have recently taken steps to increase pay, and it's moving us down the list. So we've got to pay attention to that and come back to council maybe mid-year or in the next budget cycle.
And I suspect mid-year you will come back to us, because it's always a constant bidding war, so to speak, and so we need to make sure that and all of our things, hence the compensation study, we're able to make sure we're leading the market. Mayor Pro Tem and then Alderman
Chief Mentor.
You're welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, Chief. There's been great conversation and deep discussion here from our council, and great responses from you and the city manager, and I truly appreciate your responses to our needs, because there are real needs. This conversation has been, coming from our work and the positive and negative things that we really see that needs to be changed and need to be applauded with the work that is being done. My comments today, Mr. Mayor and Chief and everybody else, City Manager, and this community, is that we're talking about solutions and problems in our police department, and what we as the leaders of this city can do and help our community to be better. But there's always a deeper root of all this situation that we're talking about today. And I believe that we have to go back to the roots of the situations of crime, and to improve our police department, to improve what is going on in our community. And what we really have to look at is, especially with our young people, there is the real situation of peer pressure that is going on in our community, in our society. and I'm going to stay right here in Savannah, a real concern with peer pressure with our young people. Poor education, just being real about the situation. Poor socioeconomic status of our young people and our older adults. Roots I'm talking about. There's a real problem with substance abuse in our community, in our city. And to top it off of my work and the deep concerns are neglectful parents, neglectful parenting. Now, we don't want to talk about real roots, and I'm so thankful for all that has been taking place in reference to what we do as leaders with leaders of the city. But sometimes somebody has to just go a little bit deeper and just pull back the covers and just talk about the real situation. Now, in reference to neglectful parents, you know what's going on in your house. You know your children, especially our mothers. We know our children. So in order to stop a lot of this crime from going on, we've got to start being parents to our children. It's real. And I still believe that it takes a village to raise our children. Some may say, oh, Dr. Shabazz, you're just talking about some old school stuff. Old school stuff still works. And it still takes the village to wrap around our children and to wrap around those who do not know. For those who do know, step up to the job. We can't be afraid of our own people. We can't be afraid of you cannot be afraid of your children. Let's take control. Let's get to the deeper root from all of the stuff that we're talking about and take care of our homes, take care of our children, take care of our parents, come outside of the home, then we're taking care of our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Pertee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a question, and some other stuff is food for thought from someone that is a police manager, a police captain for a police department, and has to deal with this stuff on a daily basis. I will tell you that there is competition in recruitment among all of our police departments in the area. Oftentimes I will get phone calls from some of my colleagues at Savannah PD asking about individuals from my department and vice versa. We do it to Savannah. So it's not a problem that's unique to Savannah. It happens all over with recruitment. With that being said, you know, it's all about the better package for that person that's being recruited. What are their personal goals? Where do they want to work? Is a take-home car important right away? Is a college education important right away? We can throw out all these pay incentives, but we have to look at what's in the area. We have to look at what other departments are providing, what other departments are offering. And you know, a lot of young folks these days, they just don't understand retirement. And 21 years, I'm in 21 years, and hopefully 9 more years, and I'm off to greener pastures or something. But there's things like that we need to look at. Competitive pay and benefits are one. The other thing that I want to say when it comes to our employees, we have some of the best employees at Savannah PD. I know this because I get a chance to work with a lot of them. I get a chance to train almost every employee that walks through the doors of Savannah PD that's a new employee, fresh out of the academy. We've got a heck of a training department at Savannah PD, and our trainers are wonderful people. They're always looking for innovative ways of training for diversity and inclusion, inclusive excellence, the most modern police technologies that we can use. So I commend our folks at Savannah PD for that. One thing that I've said time and time again, what helped us out at our department was to learn from the ground up. Look at the folks that are walking their beats. Look at the folks that are writing those calls every day, And we have engaged our folks with something called, and Mr. Melder, Mr. Mentor, Chief Mentor, you've heard me talk about this before, an employee engagement survey. And when you look at those employee engagement surveys and get a real feel for what your staff is going through, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, it will help you gauge where you want to start putting focus on recruitment, retention, and helping to boost morale in the department. Because sometimes it is about pay. It is about stability. And sometimes it's about a culture. And sometimes there's a culture change that needs to happen. You know, we harp and harp on community policing, but, you know, oftentimes what's left out is what Dr. Shabazz just said. The family structure, the back-to-basics stuff in police work, you know. Intel-based policing, that's huge. That's huge. We need community support. Police officers can't do this stuff all on their own. If they don't have partnerships with the community and they don't have that community support, it's not going to happen. They can ride each beat every day, respond to calls, get out there in the community and talk to folks, but if they don't have the support from the community, it's not going to happen. So there's a deep culture change that needs to take place, not just within our community, but if there's something within the department, then that's how you look at it, is from the ground up. It's one thing to put captains together, majors together, lieutenants together, and look at, you know, an HR and how do we address these issues. Take it from the guys and girls that are every day writing those calls, that are every day coming to work, that are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., every holiday that they don't get to spend with their family. What is it that motivates them? And you're always going to get disgruntled employees. Every department has them. But take that overall feedback and look at it objectively. Be transparent with it and see what we can do to make this a better Savannah and not a bitter Savannah. Because I think there's a lot that we could do. But overall, thank you, and thank your officers for doing the hard work that they do every day and for being that good community partner that we expect.
Thank you very much, Alderman.
Chief, let me just say thank you again for your time, and thank you for Savannah Police Department and what they do. As a person who wore a police uniform, sworn officer, sworn law enforcement trainer, there are 4 of us here. Policing is not what it used to be, and we have to be very clear about that. It was a time where police officers were celebrated within a community, and now they're looked on many times with disdain and disgust. Pop culture says it's not cool to be a police officer, which is why it's difficult to be able to recruit them. And that is a challenge that's being faced all over our nation. People are quick to say when police officers do bad, but we're very familiar. I'm very familiar many times that they do good. I'm familiar with Saturday at the Dining in the Dark, where you had a whole team of SWAT officers helping people understand what it's like to be low vision or blind. I'm familiar with the 2 officers that we will acknowledge today for jumping in the water to save someone's life. There are many, many opportunities in which we can accentuate the positive, but you know, maybe it's human nature just to talk about the negative. We talk about the times when they don't get it right, but the many times that they do. I'm familiar that the fact is that beyond our 90% clearance rate, our 8% drop in violent crime, many of our crimes were solved because police officers were there within 2 minutes and sometimes saw the end of the crime in progress and were able to make that happen. People have choices, and so people are exercising their choices, and we know throughout law enforcement and HR, people just don't stay. They're not loyal to anybody. They just go. I mean, they go, and they're not seeking, as Alderman Pertee said, they're not seeking retirement anymore. And so we understand that. And finally, we talk a lot about, and people say we need more police, more police, more police. There are terms over policing. There are terms disproportionate minority contact, and we see on the equity side what that also means, and we have to be able to balance that as well. And so I want to thank you for your efforts. Thank the police department for their efforts. I think it should be Mississippi City Manager to make sure that our employees, police and otherwise, are the best compensated, and compensated doesn't just mean pay. But we're also always seeking to provide the best work experience, provide the best work-life balance for not only our police department who go running to danger, but to those that support them and Team Savannah as a whole. So, Chief, thank you very much, and we appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council.
Be
Thank you,
safe out
Mr.
there.
Miller. Thank you.